It's time now to take a look at news stories making headlines around the globe. And the federal government has warned that there would be dire consequences for the stability of the country if a nationwide protest being planned by some Nigerians goes ahead from the beginning of next month. Secretary to the government of the Federation, Senator George Akume, met with ministers in his office behind closed doors to try to avert the protests. But Nigeria's Labour Congress yesterday dismissed reports that it was withdrawing from the proposed national protest by some citizens over the harsh economic situation in the country, saying it cannot be a part of an idea that it did not emanate from it. In a similar vein, Minority Caucus of the House of Representatives urged the federal government to dialogue with planned protesters with a view to addressing their concerns. The Minister of Information and National Orientation, Mohammed Idris, issued the warning against the protest yesterday when he received members of the Charismatic Bishops' Conference led by Archbishop Professor Leonard Kawas, who were on a courtesy visit to him at his office in Abuja. Idris said government was cautious and bothered about the protest against economic hardship, having seen the debilitating consequences of similar protests in other parts of the world, particularly in Kenya and most recently in Bangladesh. Let's take a listen.
We know that it is almost impossible to hold this protest and then have peace at the end of the day. You cannot do that. People are waiting to take laws into their hands. And therefore, government will always protect lives and property of the people, because that is why the government is there in the first place. Therefore, the message of Mr. President is that he has heard all the pleas, all the complaints, all the suggestions, all the commentaries of especially the youth, and not just the youth, of all members of the Nigerian society, about some of the difficulties or the challenges that they are facing. But Mr. President is also putting in place a number of measures to ameliorate that. Some of them you have already mentioned. For example, the Students' Loan Board, the NEL Fund. This is unprecedented. It is an attempt to ensure that every student that has the necessary credentials to go to the university or polytechnic or any tertiary institution has the right to do so.
Also reacting to the planned protests is Imo State Governor and Chairman of the Progressives Governors Forum, Hope Uzodinma, has cautioned against the planned nationwide protests next month, citing fragile political environment and the potential of being hijacked by criminals, drawing parallels to the EndSARS movement. Speaking with State House correspondents after meeting with President Bola Tinubu, Uzodinma urged citizens to protect the nation's stability and avoid actions that could worsen economic hardship. This appeal comes amid growing public discontent and calls for nationwide protests starting next month in response to economic hardships and policy decisions.
I think it is the wrong time for anybody to do any protest, because the implication of doing that, if care is not taken, is that it may be hijacked, like the EndSARS experience, where criminals now hijacked and innocently conceived agitation by young Nigerians. So this is another kind of temptation that I think too, that those behind the protest, because they have not been able to come out openly to say they are behind it, there is something that is a motive that is yet to be unraveled. So I think that we are not in support of the protest. We are not going to support any protest that has no programs, that is not discussed, that nobody knows what the problems are. Okay, if you are protesting, what do you want government to do? Because the reason for protest is that they want an issue to be addressed. What are the issues? So in my view, I think there is no need to overheat the polity, overheat our environment, and put our people in a position that the hardship that is occasioned by economic recession all over the world is further worsened. So I advise against the protest.
I mean, what a ludicrous thing to say. To hear that, I can imagine how many people could feel, especially if they are suffering under these economic hardships, to hear a governor say, well, if people are protesting, they're protesting because they want an issue to be addressed, so what's the problem? Well, What do you mean, what's the problem? The problem is the issue, this economic hardship. So I don't think at this point we've reached a stage where this is a semantics issue where we can discuss about it. I think there has to be something tangible. Otherwise, we are edging ever so close to the end of this month and the beginning of next month. And if something is not done, I do think that these protests will be inevitable. Another thing that I do think should be made clear, though, is that protests, by their definition in Nigeria, have largely started off being peaceful. There have been lots of parallels drawn to the EndSARS protests of 2020 and thereafter. And it is important to note that those protests were peaceful before they were infiltrated and then, of course, put down in a very violent way. So I do think that while we can definitely call for peace and unity in a country, these issues need to be addressed. Otherwise, you will see civil discontent and civil organizations in this type of way.
Yeah. Thank you, Adefemi. So why do people protest, as you've already highlighted? It's when people feel like they're not being heard, or one of the ways to demonstrate the fact that they want to be listened to by the powers in government, especially in this case, and also to be able to air their grievances and to demonstrate just how discontent or unhappy they are with the way that things are going. And that was what happened with the EndSARS protest. Since a lot of parallel has been drawn to that, why was the protest done? Because for years, Nigerians had complained about SARS and how they had used, the tactics they had used and the violence, and they wanted the government to listen to them. And if the government listened, actually they did. Because after the protest, SARS was disbanded. It was very unfortunate that, that unscrupulous elements hijacked that protest and turned it violent. I need to emphasize that so that people don't keep focusing on misconstruing the fact that people who are protesting or Nigerians who are protesting are the ones who usually engage in violence. The word is hijack, and the UN has also warned that there are concerns around the protests being planned for August 1 being hijacked by unscrupulous elements. So let's get that fact clear. Now, in case the governors, for instance, Governor Hope Uzodinma or the Minister of Information and National Orientation need to understand why Nigerians want to go to protest, they've quite outlined their reasons in many areas on X, in different platforms. One of the hashtags simply says end bad governance. It means that the people are discontent with the way that government is running currently. Number 2 is end poverty. People are unhappy with the fact that they cannot go to the market and buy goods and pay for services based on how much they are earning. So the purchasing power of people in Nigeria have been eroded. These are some of the things. Food inflation, that people say being power, they are hungry. People are simply hungry. And at the end of the day, and we kept talking about this, when you keep pushing people after a while, to the wall, they would revolt. But that's what they are trying to avoid. Right? Now, if the minister is concerned, and very well within his, he's very well to say that there are concerns around the safety of lives and property. And of course, as a matter of national security, they want to ensure that people don't go out and then provide an opportunity for it to be hijacked. I hear him. Now, if that is the case, then the onus is on the government to provide an alternative way for people to feel like they can really speak to power and power listens. Effective communication is not that people are talking. It is that when people speak, you hear what they are saying, and there's commensurate action to demonstrate that you hear what they're saying. Now they're coming out with plans, which is good. And I said this yesterday. He's talked about the fact that NYSC, post-NYSC people, some young people would get the opportunity to receive a stipend from the government. Good. They've talked about the fact that CNG buses will be embedded in policies going forward, so that it is when their vehicles talked about CNG buses or CNG vehicles are part of it. Good. They've talked about the trucks of food that have gone to individual states. Good. But I don't think the people are satisfied with the response so far. So when I say alternative source, why can't the president, we've given that option here, have a stakeholder meeting with some young people? President Ruto did it in Kenya, even though it was post the protests. So it's important for the president to be able to come out and talk to his people. Nigerians, the young people, and we said it yesterday, and I think you said it, the Nigerians are very patient, very, understanding. All they want is a government that listens. And for you to, elaborate your economic reforms and give us a timeline. We know things are difficult at the moment, but X time, you're going to see a difference. And when they give us that timeline, unlike the NNPC who gave us the timeline for the refineries working, let it actually work. Let the people earn the trust of the people. And I not just say this finally, I saw the Minister for Youth Affairs. I think she should be playing a very critical role at this time. What are you doing to mobilize the young people in Nigeria to give them an alternative to protest? Not just saying that it's bad, don't do it. Give people an alternative to the protest. What do you have on the table?
Okay, what are the key issues on the table? As follows. Yesterday, the Office of the Secretary to the Government of the Federation met with other principal government officials. And the objective of that meeting is to see how they can avert the protest that has been planned for August 1 to 10, labeled Days of Rage in Nigeria. I made a point yesterday that no responsible government will fold its arms and allow anybody, no matter what their right may be, to impose rage, chaos, anarchy on the country. And we have seen the extent to which this is true yesterday in the United States, when protesters, anti-Netanyahu, anti-Israel protesters, took over the Union Station and Pennsylvania Avenue. Over 200 persons were arrested. And the police were saying that, look, your right under the First Amendment is protected, the constitutional right to protest, but you do not have the right to cause mayhem, to go beyond. It was on the basis of that 200 protesters were arrested. Now, so in Nigeria here, the Minister of Information, who was giving us a feedback from the meeting that was held, said they decided that, look, you can protest, but you do not have the right to be violent. Now, where he went a bit overboard was when he was quoting Femi Falana on SAN. And he said, oh, Femi Falana on SAN is entitled to his own opinion. There's nothing that Femi Falana on SAN has said that is counterproductive or anti-government. He simply said that, look, the right to protest is a constitutional right. And I think I must have said it on this program, that in IGP versus AMPP and others, 2007 case, the court ruled that what they call the Public Order Act is unconstitutional and illegal. So you can protest, but the police or the government cannot tell you you cannot protest. It's a constitutional right. What the government will not allow is imposing rage. Now, the second point that we have seen is that opinion is divided about this planned protest. You have the Nigerian Labour Congress saying we are not part of it. You have a charismatic bishops' conference, members of which, the leadership of which visited the Minister of Information, saying no, we would rather call for a truce. You have northern groups like the ICPR and the RAID also calling on government to negotiate and discuss with the people. You have governors like Governor Abiodun, like Governor Opuzodimma, also saying that, look, the protest will be counterproductive. And you have civil society persons like Ayemiri Emame, who was celebrating Ologboshare Day in Warri yesterday, who also said President Tinubu did not cause hunger, that the problem of hunger has always been there in Nigeria. So the opinion is divided on this. What is worrisome, however, is that who is the Nigerian government going to negotiate with? Who is Tinubu going to dialogue with? Because there are no known leaders. And that is why perhaps the Minister of Information was making the point contextually that, look, what happened in Kenya? What happened in Bangladesh? In Bangladesh, about 200 people died with students protesting over, quota, what we call federal character in Nigeria. At the end of the day, the country was shut down. And that's why I made the point that no government will fold its arms. The Kenya example has already reproduced itself in Uganda, where, Museveni has found himself saying, yes, you can protest, but we will not allow anarchy in our country. Now, people should be reminded also of what happened in 2011, when, on account of one incident in Tunisia, the whole of the Middle East was thrown into turmoil. So I think that at the end of the day, our position should be that people can protest, but there should be no violence. If there is violence, the state will protect itself. But beyond all of this, of course, is that the Tinubu administration, which was what Ayo was referring to, via the Minister of Information, is saying government is taking measures to address, the hunger in the land, the difficulties with transportation and other things. But the thing about this is that, look, in a developing country like Nigeria, there are rising expectations. People want results. You can't come 1 year, you are still making promises. You come back at the end of 1 year, you are still making promises. The people are impatient. Promises will not put food on the table. But however, we have been told all of us to go and find space to farm. And that way we'll solve the problem. Whether that will solve the problem remains to be seen. So in case you have, they call it smart farming.
Okay.
In case you have a balcony, you can plant vegetables.
There's
little
no time
one.
to farm. We're going out to look for work.
Exactly.
Anyway,
We need to
I
make
rest my
ends meet. Well, thank you very much.